told supporters in a conference call that because so much money is being spent in opposition to this deal, a lot of members are really feeling the political heat and some are getting, quote, squishy. Are you experiencing that in your trips to Capitol Hill to talk to people? And secondly, when you do come across, when the president does feel somebody's getting squishy, are you the guy he calls and says, get up there and firm things up?
Well, I don't know. He's probably calling other people too, but I'm certainly getting enough calls. Yes, to go up and speaking with many members, and frankly, I welcome it. And I've been very, frankly, pleased at how many members are really digging into the documents, both the public and the confidential documents that we have supplied. Squishy, I wouldn't use that term, at least in my experiences. What I have seen, I've spoken with many members after they have had visits, shall we say, and I think what it has led them is to sharpen their questions, and hopefully for us to sharpen our answers. So I think that's all we can do is continue the process of explaining exactly what this agreement is, because I think it'll stand on its own.
Carol?
The IAEA Director General is going to meet with senators next week, and based on your conversation with lawmakers and how much this so-called side deal has raised concerns among them, do you think that meeting will be enough, and did the White House or the administration have anything to do with getting the Director General to head to the Hill and meet with these senators?
Well, first of all, I do want to just dispel this idea of secret side deals, again, because just make sure the record is straight on that. There is no secret side deal. The agreement, the JCPOA agreement is that Iran will finally stop blunting the IAEA's attempt to finish its PMD investigation. I do want to emphasize, we think that this last visit to one site is kind of the whole thing. There's been many years of activity, many reports. In fact, that's what is responsible for a lot of the sanctions of the last years. So the agreement is, and this is not secret, this is public, Iran must respond by October the 15th in terms of providing IAEA all of the access it has asked for in their agreed-upon protocol. Those protocols, as a standard, are called safeguards confidential between the country and the IAEA. And the IAEA's independence is very important to our long-term interests. So it's a standard safeguards confidential protocol. I'll give you an example, by the way. If you go back almost 25 years, the IAEA, basically took apart the South African program. Those documents all remain confidential. That's just standard. So the issue is IAEA negotiated with Iran in confidential protocols what would be the steps required for the IAEA to have satisfaction that it could finish the job and issue the final report on what happened. Typically, we're talking like 12 years ago. So I think Amano will come. I think I welcome that. And I should say, when I met with the Director General in Vienna a few days before the agreement was completed, he said then that he was going to be very happy to come and have discussions with the administration and with the Congress. I'm personally quite pleased that he's following up on that in a timely way. I think it would be very helpful.
Some.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You said you're not responsible for counting votes, but you've spent a considerable amount of time on the Hill and in public and also behind closed doors meeting with members of Congress. You also said you didn't observe any of them getting squishy, as the President said. What's your level of confidence now on the Hill?
Well, I remain confident that this agreement will go into effect. I think, it ultimately, if certainly unless there are just too many closed minds, it was not. The thing which probably most disappointed me was all the opining on the agreement before it was reached. But I think as long as there are open minds, the agreement is very powerful in its constraints on the Iranian program and on its enhanced verification measures. So I think as long as we keep at it and keep explaining that and have others like Secretary Kerry, Secretary Carter, the President reinforce our regional security commitments more broadly, I think that this deal will certainly go into effect.
Jeff.
Mr. Secretary, I know some people see this as connected to the Iran deal and some people don't, but there's some growing momentum in Congress for lifting the U.S. ban on oil exports. Is that something that you would support, or is that something you have concerns about?
Well, I find the linkage to be a little bit interesting. I would note, first of all, a slight difference here that Iran is, after all, an oil exporter. They like to be more of an oil exporter than they are today, obviously. The United States remains an importer of 7 million barrels of crude oil per day. So these are very, very asymmetric situations. There's a broader issue in general about American oil exports. Obviously, the Congress has been acting on that. That's a question for Secretary Pritzker.
Is it something you would support, or encourage the administration to support?
It's a question for Secretary Pritzker.
Lynn.
Could you tell me how you're talking? I understand you just had a meeting with leaders of major Jewish organizations before coming
Correct.
here, some who oppose the group. Can you tell me if you think you made any headway in selling the deal, and what are the questions that you think are most formidable to persuading these leaders of Jewish groups who are opposed to it?
Well, first of all, it was a very good meeting, and a number of the Jewish leaders came in from across the country. So, I mean, it showed, I think, right there a very, very strong interest in really having a chance to discuss the agreement in depth. Make progress. Again, I don't like to make value judgments. I can just say that it was a very good discussion. Not surprising. These were people who were well schooled in the agreement, but also had lots of clarifying questions to ask. I felt that we made real progress in terms of clarification of issues, in terms of how this agreement was ultimately good for our security and for the security in the region. A lot of the questions, some of the ones being asked here, what's the 24 days? What's the IAEA arrangement? I would say a lot of it focused on these questions of verification, because we all I think understand that those are central to this question of finding any covert activity. I think, for example, a point that was we emphasized and I think had impact and had not been as fully appreciated is this idea of having transparency across the entire supply chain of uranium, and how that significantly enhanced our capabilities to find anything outside that allowed supply chain. So I think it was a very, very good meeting, and you're certainly correct that I think it was quite appropriate. People came to that meeting with very, very different perspectives.
Mark.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, putting aside the whole secret side deal allegation.
There is no secret side deal.
As you have put it aside, what do you say to the folks who say we're placing a lot of trust in the IAEA, in fact subcontracting out a decision about what American sanctions will be doing in the future? Should we trust the IAEA to that extent?
The IAEA is we've always trusted the IAEA. The IAEA is an extremely competent organization. I might add, partly because at a place like Los Alamos National Laboratory, we have courses that all of the IAEA inspectors take, for example, and that's been going on for decades. We have, obviously, there are many, many nationalities involved in the IAEA safeguards activities. A number of them are American, typically coming from our laboratories. So, they will not be part of the inspection teams because of our lack of diplomatic relations, but they are a very competent organization. What we have done is give them the tools they need to apply those talents, and I might say, to expand their scope relative to other countries as well, hopefully. For example, this issue of having verification opportunities literally for the uranium supply chain is something that they have sought in many, they would love to have. They've sought it in other occasions, unsuccessfully. This will be the first time they'll have that capability. This is a period in which they will have, an agreement in which they will have the ability to deploy advanced technologies, enrichment monitoring technologies, I might add, developed at our national laboratories, electronic seals. Our laboratories have worked on that, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's the issue. They are very competent. They need to have the options at their disposal to deploy